Cisco is working to power an inclusive future for all. Access to information, security, equality, and fairness. Cisco, the bridge to possible. Learn more at cisco.com/go/bridge to possible.
With a vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill tonight, as progressives in our own party revolt and threaten to vote it down. Is the vote and the president's agenda headed for failure? Plus, a hospital dealing with violent COVID-related attacks is now giving each healthcare worker a panic button. How in the world did it come to this? And more breaking news. New body cam video of an officer talking to Gabby Petito after Petito and her fiance, Brian Laundrie, were reportedly fighting in their van. A whole lot of what she said happened now on tape as the FBI tonight returns to the Laundrie family home. Let's go out front. And good evening. I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news, Nancy Pelosi's Hail Mary. The House Speaker said to be furiously working the phones, twisting arms, trying to whip up support for Biden's bipartisan infrastructure plan. A vote on that plan, according to Pelosi, is still on for tonight.
As I said earlier, that's the path. That's number one.
But the big question is, does she have the votes? Sources tell CNN Pelosi is changing some no votes to yes in these final hours, which is a testament to her power as Speaker. But it is still leaving Pelosi with an historic decision to make. Pull the vote or bring it to the floor and likely watch it fail. Fail, if it does fail, it will be because members of the president's own party voted against it, against the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. Can't say it enough, a bipartisan infrastructure bill. Progressives have vowed to torpedo the bill because they still do not have a framework for their much bigger wish list, currently a $3.5 trillion spending bill that would touch on everything. You can see it. Maternity leave, climate crisis, community college, childcare, universal pre-K, those child tax credits, $556 billion cost just over a couple of years. It is a bill that will remake the role of government in American life. And the price tag is a no-go for moderates in the Senate. And Senator Joe Manchin today revealing publicly that the most he wants that bill to cost is $1.5 trillion. Now, that's $2 trillion less than where progressives are right now.
I've never been a liberal in any way, shape, or the form. I'm willing to come from 0 to 1.5.
Okay, progressives had originally had 6.5, so they consider this whole 3.5 to be a huge compromise. Now he says 1.5 or take a hike, and they are seething.
This is absolutely absurd. It is unconscionable that he can stand puffed up and hold the line on something that hurts people now, and to say that I'll toss you some crumbs right now and then hopefully you can say you ate. It's not good enough and I won't stand for it.
My number is 3.5. Our number is 3.5. Somebody has a different offer, then they can put it on the table. You don't negotiate against yourself.
So right there, of course, was the Progressive Caucus Chairwoman Pramila Jayapal clearly saying, well, 3.5 is the number, and that she had not been informed of Manchin's $1.5 trillion number. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, because Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, he has known about Manchin's $1.5 trillion demand since July 28th. In what's called a, quote, agreement, first reported by Politico, Manchin states, top line $1.5 trillion. It goes on to say Senator Manchin does not guarantee that he will vote for the final reconciliation legislation if it exceeds the conditions outlined in this agreement. Now, you see the signatures, Joe Manchin III and Charles Schumer. Now, Charles Schumer's office said today he never agreed to the conditions, but the letter, of course, is signed by him. It was signed by him. And so obviously he knew Manchin would only support $1.5 trillion. And in fact, so did the progressive Democrats. If they just listened. I mean, maybe they weren't listening or maybe they just did not want to hear. But the reality of it is Manchin has come out and said this $1.5 trillion ceiling publicly. He said it to our own Dana Bash on State of the Union on September 12th.
Then how do you know that it's not 3.5?
It's going to be at 1, 1.5. We don't know where it's going to be.
So you think ballpark 1.5?
It's not going to be at 3.5, I can assure you.
So you just said 1.5. It sounds like 1.5 trillion.
I'm just saying that basically, I've looked at numbers. If we have a competitive tax code from a non-competitive, it doesn't help the working person that was done in 2017, that's in the 1.5 range, okay?
1.5. Look, such that there is a legislative crisis tonight, right? It is inflicted by Democrats on Democrats. Self-inflicted agony. And Manu Raju is out front live on Capitol Hill. And Manu, look, the question tonight is whether Pelosi will bring the vote to the floor. It is incredible, by the way, to be in this situation, right, where we don't know. She's never brought a bill to the floor before. That's failed. And still here at 7:05 Eastern time, it's an unknown what will happen. You know, what do you think?
It's unclear. Right now, behind the scenes, what is going on is an effort to try to get a deal between some of the key constituencies here. The White House, Democratic leaders, Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, as well as to get some sign-off from folks on the left, influential people on the left, people like Senator Bernie Sanders. Get them to agree to a potential framework of what that larger bill, that larger expansion of the social safety net would look like, dealing with healthcare, education, the climate change issue, and what that overall price tag would be. Now, they have been so far apart on this issue for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's hard to see how that could ultimately come together tonight. But the belief among the top Democrats who are trying to get this vote through the House tonight is that if they can get some sort of agreement on paper for these key members, perhaps that could be enough to assuage those progressives, the same ones who are threatening to tank this infrastructure bill tonight because they believe that this larger bill needs to go through first. Now, that is the key point here. The progressives have said that that larger bill, the social safety net expansion, needs to pass Congress first before they will agree to vote yes on the infrastructure plan. So the question is, will any of them change their mind? Because clearly it is not going to pass first before tonight. So at the moment, Nancy Pelosi is still moving aggressively behind the scenes to try to get her caucus in line, try to get some sort of agreement. And then ultimately, nothing's going to happen, Aaron, before 9 p.m. tonight. That's when the House comes back into session. At that point, we'll see if they can get a deal. If not, they'll have to punt it and raising more questions about whether this can get done.
All right, Manu, thank you. And so now let's go to the White House. Phil Mattingly is there. So what do you, what are they thinking? I mean, this is an incredible moment that President Biden obviously did not think would happen. And here we are, where if the president's own bipartisan bill fails, it will be because his own party voted it down.
Yeah, Aaron, the White House officials I've spoken to are keenly aware of the dynamics right now and the very high hurdle they're facing at this moment. And they make clear that no matter what happens tonight or tomorrow, the negotiations will continue. They just don't have the option of giving up at this point in time. However, what we have seen, and Manu alluded to it there, is a very urgent, very real behind-the-scenes effort from President Biden's top policy and legislative affairs officials to try and get to some agreement on that framework. The president, at Speaker Pelosi's request, once she made clear she was going to make a very real push today, the president dispatched his top policy team to Capitol Hill to try and see with Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's top aides whether or not they could figure out some way to thread the needle here. It's a level of urgency. These officials have always been involved in these talks, but it is very, very acute at this moment, particularly given how aware everybody is of the dynamics. There is some sense that if they can just put something together, some kind of framework, get signed off by the right people, that there is a way to unlock this and at least move it forward. It seems very long odds at this point in time based on people I'm talking to, but the effort is real, the urgency is real, and it's clear that the White House understands what Pelosi is doing and understands they need to play a very important, very integral role as she pushes forward tonight, Aaron.
All right, Phil, thank you very much. And now let's go to Democratic Congressman John Yarmuth. He is the chair of the House Budget Committee. His committee has already passed its initial version of the $3.5 trillion spending bill. So, Chairman, I appreciate your time. Moderate Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer just was on CNN moments ago, and I know you've got a lot going on. You may not have saw what he had to say. Okay, so I'll just tell you what he said was, quote, he's 1,000% certain that the bipartisan infrastructure bill will pass the House tonight. Are you?
Nope, I can't say that I agree with Josh. I think it's pretty much a long shot to pass it tonight. If it comes for a vote, I'll vote for it. I think it's a good piece of legislation, and I take every piece of legislation individually, and I will support it. Even though I'm a progressive, and I'm strongly committed to making sure that the Build Back Better Act is enacted into law. So we'll see. I have plenty of Kentucky bourbon around, so I can fortify myself for the evening. But, this deadline tonight, and I know everybody wants to make this a dramatic threshold, but it really doesn't mean much We have plenty of time to do both of these bills. We could pass them next week. We could pass them in November. We could pass them in December. We could pass them in January. And I know the conventional wisdom is that the longer you go, the more difficult it gets. But I think, one of the things that we have made a mistake at is we've kind of lost the narrative, focusing on dollar amounts instead of exactly what the initiatives in these programs would mean for the American people. We need to do a better job of that.
All right. Well, and I hear you on that, first of all. Secondly, I think it's important just to emphasize here that you say you would be a yes because you look at everything individually. Obviously, there are some in your caucus who, are categorical that they don't see it this way. And I know that's why you're not sure it will pass. But here's the thing. Your committee did recently pass, your own version, right, a $3.5 trillion spending plan. Right. I don't want to make it all about the numbers, but some in your caucus are, right? I mean, you heard the chairman of the caucus, Pramila Jayapal, saying, well, I said $3.5 trillion, and that's what it is, and I'm not going to negotiate against myself. But Joe Manchin is making it clear, 1 to 1.5, and that's it. Is that, knowing that he's saying that, are you okay with that?
Well, what I'm okay with is taking advantage of the opportunity we have to do something incredibly important for the American people. And we're not going to have this opportunity very often. So the number itself is meaningless. I mean, I read Joe Manchin's statement. I've listened to him. He has no understanding of how the federal government monetary system works. When he compared it yesterday to his household income, that has no relevance to what we can do. It's not a question of what we can afford. The federal government can afford anything that it feels it needs to do. And right now, that's what we ought to be focused on. So, that's kind of the position I took in the Budget Committee. That's the position I will take going forward. Yep. The shame is that we have an opposition party, the Republican Party, who doesn't think the federal government has any obligation to do anything about providing child care, early childhood education, paid family and medical leave, any of the things that are in the Build Back Better Act. If they're not going to recognize that these are national responsibilities, then we have to act alone, and it puts us in this very, very convoluted process called reconciliation that has basically opened itself up to all these this brinkmanship.
So there's a couple other things I want to ask you. First, I want to ask you, Chuck Schumer, obviously the Politico obtained the document that shows that on July 28th, Senator Schumer signed off on Senator Manchin's parameters for a $1.5 trillion spending bill. It was signed by both of them, right? Manchin signed it. Schumer signed it. And it mentions things like need-based testing, means testing, right? For example, for the child tax credit. It lists no additional handouts or transfer payments, and it does raise the ordinary income rate, corporate tax rate. It puts up to 25. But I guess the question here that I have is that Schumer said he never agreed to the conditions, but his signature is there. Okay, he didn't not read it and just sign it. How do you feel about this? This is July 28th.
I don't know. Well, first of all, I don't think Chuck Schumer can sign away policy for 49 other members of the Democratic caucus in the Senate. I suspect all he thought he was signing was acknowledging that this is what Joe Manchin's position was. But again, he can't bind the 95% of the Democrats in the Senate to that position. And so to me, that's kind of one of these documents that is meaningless.
And just one final thing I got to ask you. You said the federal government can do whatever it wants to do. I mean, it can, so long as people are willing to lend to the United States money at low rates. Right. And okay, you will be right that they have done that a lot longer than a lot of people thought that they would do. But it does raise the question, right? I mean, putting aside a taxation question, just looking at the taxes that you have in this bill, on your own number, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, looking at the Ways and Means Committee's numbers here on the $3.5 trillion bill, they say you're going to borrow $1.4 trillion. They also say that the real cost of the bill, since things like the child tax credit are not going to go away in 3 years, they're going to become permanent. That's your goal, I know. Would be $5.5 trillion. So then that's $3.4 trillion that you're borrowing. That is a lot of money. Are you really comfortable with that?
It is. It's $3.4 trillion over 10 years. We're going to spend twice as much during that time on defense. If you take the entire, add up all of the things that we're proposing to do, it would be essentially about 5% more than we will spend otherwise. We're going to spend $61 trillion over the next 10 years. So to add another $3.4 or $5 trillion to it is very, I think is pretty inconsequential when you consider all the benefits to the American people. And these are benefits that will last for decades.
Right. No, I hear you. It's an interesting conversation. I'd love to continue talking about it because I hear what you're saying, and I also hear there's a little 3 here and there's a little 3 there, and pretty soon you're talking real money.
Talking about real money.
Right. All right. Well, I appreciate your time. Chairman, thank you so much.
You bet. My pleasure.
All right. And next, from California to New York to private sector companies like United, undeniable evidence that vaccine mandates are working. Plus, breaking news, new body cam video tonight of an officer talking to Gabby Petito during a traffic stop just weeks before she was reported missing.
We want to know the truth if he actually hit you. Where did he hit you? Don't worry, just be honest.
And Trump has weighed in on Virginia's closely watched governor's race, but the Republican candidate does not seem to be taking his advice.
But the former president says you need to embrace him more and embrace the MAGA movement more.
Well, he knows exactly where I stand.
Where will we be in 5 years? In 50 years? Will everyone have access to information and security, to equality and fairness? Cisco has made it its purpose to power an inclusive future for all. Where will we be in 50 years? Let's go see. Between the world and what we make of it, there's a bridge. Cisco, the bridge to possible. Learn more at cisco.com/go/bridge to possible.
The universe has a sense of humor, especially when it comes to cars. As soon as a warranty expires, things start to break and those repairs are no longer covered. CarShield picks up where your warranty leaves off, with service plans that cover expensive repairs, coverage that could save you thousands of dollars. They pay your favorite mechanic or dealership directly, making the entire process fast and easy. Get a free quote by calling 800-416-6522 or visit carshield.com.
Tonight, vaccine mandates are working and causing a jump in vaccinations for healthcare workers and others. The New York Times reports that one California hospital saw a 97% compliance rate, with as many as 800 workers getting their shot due to a mandate. New York State's governor saying 92% of the state's nursing home workers have received at least one shot. 92%. That number was 71% just over a month ago. Then came the mandate. And the only major U.S. airline with a mandate, United, says 99.5% of its employees have complied. Out front now, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, former FDA commissioner and author of the new book, Uncontrolled Spread, Why COVID-19 Crushed Us and How We Can Defeat the Next Pandemic. So, Dr. Gottlieb, I mean, sure, some people have been fired for not complying. I understand that. But these numbers they're factual. These are the numbers. The mandates have increased vaccinations. They just simply have. So do you think we should see more of them?
Well, look, there's no question that they're working to increase the vaccination rates. First of all, we should just take a step back and look at what we've achieved. 78% of adults have had at least one dose of vaccine. Most of them will complete the series. That's a remarkable achievement for an adult vaccine that's been largely voluntary. And that owes to the good work of the administration. And if we were dealing with one of the old variants right now, the Wuhan variant or even B117, if we had 78% of the public vaccinated, that probably would be enough to provide a wall of immunity. The only reason we're trying to reach higher, and we really need to reach higher from a public health standpoint, is we're dealing with the Delta variant, which is a far more contagious variant. Look, I think the federal government's well within their prerogative to mandate vaccination among the federal workforce. That's an issue of federal readiness. I think that we should be mandating vaccination among other groups like the elderly. I think we should be trying to work with Medicare programs to try to get Medicare providers and health plans to get higher vaccination rates in the older population. That's where we can make a real difference. I think mandating vaccine among healthcare workers also makes a lot of sense because it's a function of protecting the people that they're caring for. I think where this gets touchy is when you mandate vaccination for private businesses down to the level of 100 employees. That's where you're going to get resistance, you're going to get lawsuits, and you're going to turn this into more of a political issue. And I think that there's public health consequences for that that we need to weigh very carefully.
So you think employee number counts? I mean, I'm not asking you to give a hard and fast number, but you're basically saying kind of the mass employers, whether you be United or Target or Walmart or the DOE in New York, you could do it, but small business, no.
I think that that's right. A lot of larger employers are going to fall within the federal mandate because, remember, they've mandated not just the federal workforce, but also people who contract with the federal government. So that's going to scope in a lot of businesses. And I think they did that because they felt they had more authority to impose mandates on businesses through that, rather than going through the Labor Department regulations and mandating down to small businesses through that mechanism. I think that they're going to capture a lot of people that way. This is going to get more political when you start to impose it on smaller businesses. The bottom line is that the decision to get vaccinated, as much as we talk about it as an individual choice, it's also a collective choice because our decision to get vaccinated it protects our community. If we're not vaccinated, we can bring the virus into a work setting, into a school. So there is a collective element to this. But to the extent that there is a collective element, I think the best place for the decision-making is at the local level, leaving it to businesses, leaving it to local communities. Now, we know not everyone was making the decision to require vaccination. That's why the federal government stepped in. But if we could use incentives rather than mandates to try to get more businesses to implement mandates at a local level, that could really help.
All right, so to get to the numbers you need to get at, all in, right, you're going to need more people vaccinated just more broadly, right? And those are people who currently can't get vaccinated. Those are people 12 and under, okay? And a new poll from the Kaiser Family Foundation shows only about 1/3 of parents who have children aged 5 to 11 say they'll vaccinate their kid as soon as it's available. 1/3. 56% are wait and see or definitely won't. Okay, the data show it's safe, but this is, again, even if it gets approval, it's going to be an EUA, right, at first. And generally, we are talking about the lowest risk group, right? We are talking about children. So where do you fall on this, Dr. Gottlieb? Do you think it should be mandated for children as soon as it's approved or not?
Yeah. Look, vaccination among kids who are eligible right now is about 50%, so we're not seeing the uptake among kids. I think pediatricians are going to have to work hard with families to try to encourage them to get children vaccinated. We're not going to see childhood vaccinations mandated until these vaccines are fully approved and there's multiple vaccines in the market. So it might not be something that happens really until the sort of fall 2021-2022 school season. CDC is going to have to take this up, make a recommendation to put this in the childhood immunization schedule. Some states have to pass separate laws to enable that. I think eventually it ends up there, but I think this is a longer-term plan. I think the thing that we could do most immediately in terms of trying to get more people vaccinated who are at high risk is require healthcare providers, Medicare Advantage plans and others, to have to vaccinate their constituents, have to vaccinate the Medicare population. That could have a big effect on getting the most vulnerable people vaccinated at higher rates.
So our affiliate KTUU is reporting 4 people were arrested at a heated meeting over whether to enact a mask mandate in Anchorage, Alaska. Some people wore makeshift badges with a Star of David that said, quote, "do not comply" on it. They were comparing mask wearing to actions taken during the Holocaust. Are you surprised at how this just continues to get uglier and uglier?
I'm surprised at how divisive these things have become, and that's why I worry about the mandates as well. We're literally going to have governors running for president potentially on a platform of opposing vaccination. And so if vaccines become another political issue that we divide ourselves on as a society, that's going to have impacts not just on the COVID vaccination rates, but vaccines across the board. That's why I think we need to tread very carefully here and make sure that the incremental benefit that we're getting in terms of additional people vaccinated is going to have enough public health payoff that it's worth the policies that we're enacting. Right now, I think we'll get to 80% just based on our current policies and the good work of the administration. I don't think we're going to get above 85%. And a lot of the people who remain unvaccinated probably had COVID, so they have some immunity. So we really need to look at, from a public health standpoint, what the marginal gains are from the increments of people that were getting vaccinated for the policies that we're implementing. I'm not saying that they're bad policies, but they need to be judged very carefully against the longer-term implications.
Right, so it isn't just punitive or, all right. Thank you so much. Dr. Gottlieb, I appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot.
All right. And next, the breaking news. We do have new body cam video that has just come out of an officer speaking to Gabby Petito alone. It's a whole lot of a long conversation. It provides a lot more insight into that reported fight that Petito had with her fiance, Brian Laundrie.
Did he slap your face or what?
Well, he grabbed me with his nail, and I guess that's why I definitely have a cut right here because I can feel it.
Plus, panic buttons for doctors and nurses as violence against healthcare workers is getting worse since the start of the pandemic. Breaking news, we have obtained new body camera footage that reveals more of what Gabby Petito told Utah police during a traffic stop with fiancé Brian Laundrie. And it's a long conversation. There's a lot more information here tonight. And it comes as the FBI visited the Laundrie family home again today to collect items to help in their search for Brian. Apparently, he has now, of course, been missing for 16 days. Leila Santiago is out front covering this as she has been every day. So, Leila, this body cam footage is quite significant because it's quite extensive, I understand.
Right, it's just under an hour, and this new body cam footage that we just obtained shows Gabby's conversation with another officer that does provide insight into what happened that day, because remember, up until now, we've only seen the body cam footage of one of 4 officers involved that day, and in this footage, we hear Gabby talk about how bickering earlier in the day led to the fight that led police to the couple.
Tonight, as the search for Brian Laundrie extends into week 2, new body camera footage released from Moab, Utah police from the August 12th traffic stop of Laundrie and Gabby Petito.
Did he hit you though? I mean, it's okay if you're saying you hit him, and then I understand if he hit you, but we want to know the truth if he actually hit you.
I guess, yeah, but I hit him first.
Where did he hit you? Don't worry, just be honest.
He grabbed my face, I guess. He didn't hit me in the face. He didn't punch me in the face or anything.
Did he slap your face or what?
Well, he grabbed me with his nail, and I guess that's why I definitely have a cut right here because I can feel it.
Yeah.
FBI agents were seen visiting the Laundrie's home again today, this time entering the house with 2 bags, leaving with 1. Agents also were seen entering the camper in the driveway. The Laundrie's attorney telling CNN, the FBI is at the Laundrie home today to collect some personal items belonging to Brian that will assist the canines in their search for Brian. There is nothing more to this. The family attorney confirms Laundrie went on a camping trip with his family at Fort DeSoto Park, 75 miles away, just days after returning home without Petito from his trip out west. We are also learning tonight Northport police say that 2 calls came in on September 10th and 11th from Gabby Petito's father in New York, who was trying to report her missing at the Laundrie family address in Florida. On September 11th, Northport authorities went to the Laundrie's home to speak with Brian and his family. They were, quote, essentially handed the information for their attorney, according to a spokesperson for the Northport police. For 3 days after Petito was reported missing, there was no information coming from the Laundries about Gabby or Brian, only a statement from the family attorney saying, quote, on behalf of the Laundrie family, it is our hope that the search for Miss Petito is successful and that Miss Petito is reunited with her family. 6 days after Gabby was reported missing, the Laundries told police Brian was missing after saying he was headed to a nearby nature reserve 3 days prior. The mystery only deepening as new facts trickle out with no clue yet as to Brian Laundrie's whereabouts.
And Aaron, in this body cam footage, you also see officers note that both Brian and Gabby both had scratches on them. Because remember, you did hear Gabby say when officers asked if he hit her, she said, well, yes, he did, but I hit him first. Also in this footage, you hear the police officer call the witness back on his cell phone. And he, too, asks the witness if he saw Brian hit Gabby. The witness says he never saw him punch her, but that he saw him push or shove her.
All right, Leila, thank you very much. And for more on this new reporting, I want to bring in our correspondent, Jean Casares, who, of course, has been closely following all the developments in this horrific story. So, Jean, look, this is very interesting. What Leila's reporting, right, is that this part of the conversation between Moab officers and Gabby Petito was nearly 50 minutes, right? So there's different angles, and this officer, nearly 50-minute conversation. This is a lot of just chance to see her talk and how she was portraying this and how she was responding. When you watch it, what do you take away?
Well, this is, as you said, brand new body cam, and we've had one body cam for several weeks now, and it's an hour and 17 minutes long, and I've really watched that. And in that body cam, one of the four officers, and we're not sure who was speaking to her because it's his body cam, right? But the one that has the beard was talking to Brian, and he said to him, "You are the victim of domestic abuse, and here's what you can do. You can get a no contact order." And he goes into great detail about what he can do so that Gabby can't contact him. And he says, but there's a problem. You live in Florida. And finally, Brian says, "I don't want her to go to jail. I love her." And he said, "Well, we're going to try to find a situation." He says, "I don't want to cite her either." But then at the end, the officer goes up to Gabby and he says, "I've got a very important question to ask you. Did you intend to hurt Brian?" And legally, that's important. That's an important question. She said, "No, I didn't. I never would." So that did that. But it was determined that there was a mental health crisis, and maybe for Gabby's welfare, it's better that it was determined that way because she could have possibly landed in jail that night.
Well, I mean, I guess you never know what would have maybe that. Well, who knows? The FBI did return to the laundry home, Jean, today to collect items to help in their search. So now we're on day 13 of a manhunt. Still no trace of Brian that we are aware of. And yet, you know, you've had them searching this nature preserve. You've had them looking for all this time. What stands out to you about the FBI going back to the house to search again?
Well, this is according to the attorney for the laundries. He said that they took some personal effects of Brian's to help them with scent dogs. So to me, that's the headline from that, because dogs are routinely used in searches, and you've got several types of dogs. But to get something that had Brian's scent on it would be a search dog, a scent dog that is trying to find Brian alive. So they have not discounted that Brian is alive. A cadaver dog is one that goes for the scent of decomposition. In cases that I have covered throughout the years, this evidence routinely comes into a courtroom. It is the forensic dog evidence. And there's great explainers on all of the training these dogs get. It's highly important in investigations. So I find it very interesting. And maybe they're not focused on the Carlton Preserve anymore because there's just very few there. But they obviously want to search somewhere, and those dogs will be useful.
All right, Jean, thank you very much for explaining all of that. And next, as the nation's most watched governor's race heats up, the Democratic candidate is doing everything he can to tie his opponent to Trump. But the Republican is keeping his distance.
You didn't mention his name tonight.
I'm a Virginia first candidate. I am on the ballot.
And a hospital will be giving its staff panic buttons as COVID-related attacks against healthcare workers are on the rise.
Angie's List is now Angie, and caring for your home just got easier. Whether you need help with routine maintenance or a dream remodel, Angie makes it easy to see reviews, compare quotes, and connect with top local pros who can get the job done right. Plus, you can see upfront pricing and instantly book hundreds of projects. No phone tag, just the work you need done at a time that works for you. Angie's got your to-do list covered from start to finish. Book your next home project today at Angie.com. That's ANGI.com.
It seems to happen like clockwork. As soon as a warranty runs out, things break and they're no longer covered. When your car is in that situation, though, you could be staring down thousands of dollars in repair bills. CarShield begins where your warranty ends with service plans that cover those expensive surprises. They pay your favorite mechanic or dealership directly, making the entire process fast and easy. Get a free quote by calling 800-416-6522 or visit carshield.com to get your free quote.
Tonight, the Trump tightrope. Glenn Youngkin, the Trump-backed candidate to be the next governor of Virginia, is gaining momentum as he walks a very fine line, echoing Trump on some issues while trying to keep his distance. This, as a new Fox News poll shows Youngkin just 4 percentage points behind former Democratic Governor Terry McAuliffe. Keep in mind, that's very significant because Trump lost Virginia by 10 points last year. Jeff Zeleny is out front.
All right, who's ready for a new governor?
Glenn Youngkin is auditioning to be a new face of the Republican Party.
We're about to absolutely send a shockwave around the country.
That shockwave would be a victory this fall in Virginia, where the GOP has not won statewide in a dozen years. He's locked in a tight race for governor with Terry McAuliffe, who's hoping to keep that Democratic streak alive by trying to paint his rival as a clone of Donald Trump.
He's a total wannabe Donald Trump.
Youngkin is testing just how big the Republican Party's tent can be.
Forever Trumpers, never Trumpers, and single-issue voters, and libertarians, and Tea Party folks, and it's about bringing people together.
Yet he rarely mentions the former president by name, a point Trump has noticed.
The only guys that win are the guys that embrace the MAGA movement. Does that make sense to you?
Yes. But the former president says you need to embrace him more and embrace the MAGA movement more.
Well, he knows exactly where I stand.
You didn't mention his name tonight.
I'm a Virginia first candidate. I am on the ballot. It's Glenn Youngkin running in Virginia.
He makes clear Republicans, at least here, must chart a new course.
You know, the Republican Party has figured out one thing over the last 12 years, and that's how to lose.
The former private equity executive is investing millions of his own money into the campaign, introducing himself through TV ads as a former college basketball player, a father of four, and an outsider.
I'm Glenn Youngkin. I'm not a politician.
But his positions are coming under closer scrutiny, like his support for requiring vaccinations for measles, mumps, and rubella, but opposing mandates for the COVID-19 vaccine.
I do believe the COVID vaccine is one that everyone should get, but we shouldn't mandate it.
Is it the politics or the science that's different about COVID and the other shots that you do support mandates for?
Oh, yeah. There's nothing about politics in here for me. Should we mandate it for young children? I think we need to just step back and recognize the best way to do this is to encourage everybody to get the vaccine.
And his calls for election integrity, which he repeatedly raised during his primary race to solidify his standing with the far-right base, despite saying now there's no evidence of fraud, as Trump and many of his followers insist.
But you believe all along, since Election Day last year, that President Biden won.
I have been very clear that there's not extensive fraud in Virginia.
With early voting underway, Youngkin is hoping to capitalize on any dissatisfaction with President Biden and the Democratic policies in Washington.
Go vote. Who's voted early already?
In a November contest in which both candidates are portraying the other as extreme, in a race that offers an early glimpse into the nation's mood going into the 2020 midterm elections.
All eyes are on Virginia. America wants us to win. Why? They need hope.
Now, Youngkin does face a careful balancing act, trying to fire up that Trump base without also uniting Democrats in opposition to Trump. But as for Terry McAuliffe, Aaron, he is keeping his eye carefully on the action or inaction on Capitol Hill. He believes Democrats must prove they can govern, which they have not done so, in his view, so far this year. So this race is far tighter than Democrats ever hoped it would be. That's what's giving them quite a bit of heartburn here in Virginia.
Right, Jeff, thank you very much. It's a fascinating race. And next, doctors and nurses equipped with panic buttons as the number of COVID-related, just listen to me here, attacks against healthcare workers grows. And Monica Lewinsky revealing a low point in her mental state at the height of the Clinton scandal.
I had asked the OIC lawyers about what happens if I die,
Tonight, panic buttons for healthcare workers. A hospital in Missouri getting panic buttons for 400 nurses and doctors. And it comes as COVID-related attacks against healthcare workers are on the rise across the country. The hospital is Cox Medical in Branson, Missouri, and it has seen assaults against employees double. And injuries to assaults against employees, triple. And healthcare workers up 358%, all in 1 year. That's pretty stunning. Lynn Yagi is out front. She's the Vice President of Clinical Services and Chief Nursing Officer at that hospital. So, Lynn, I really appreciate your time. Can you describe what you and your fellow healthcare workers are actually seeing in terms of these violent incidents?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Erin. Healthcare violence and nurses being put in situations that are harmful is not new. And we've seen that rise over the decades. But what I'm seeing different is that nurses now are making decisions about where they're going to work based on their safety. And so we are looking at whatever tools that we can find to make sure that we can prevent that harm to them, because they're our most valuable resource. All of our healthcare workers are.
Yes.
And so what we've seen over this year is people's escalation and frustrations. We've implemented, just like every other hospital in the country, restrictions on visiting. So everyone is escalated. And the frontline staff are the ones who usually take the brunt of that.
I mean, it's just awful. Some part of me, I understand what you're saying, but there's a part of me, I'm just deeply shocked by this. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible, Lynn, what you're talking about. And I know that, you've seen the violence against healthcare workers had already started to rise before the pandemic, as now the pandemic has made it much, much worse. And, so when we talk about violence, and what sorts of things are you seeing? I mean, you have to have a panic button. I mean, we're talking about physical things here.
Oh, yes, for sure. But what we've done is implemented reporting systems in the last, I'd say, 10 years in healthcare, and they are more robust. So what we've asked staff to do is report things that happen to you at work. That way we start having a record and a baseline for what's happening. So that could range anywhere from a verbal assault, someone screaming and yelling and cussing at you, threatening you. That could lead to slapping, punching, spitting, those things. And that's just the nature of healthcare work. Now, some patients are demented and they don't have intent of harming you. And I think that's the hardest transition for healthcare workers. They don't want to report someone who's not intentionally trying to hurt them. And
it's
so
incredible. In Texas, Methodist healthcare system, the chief nursing executive there, who, your colleague there, she said our staff have been cursed at, screamed at, threatened with bodily harm, and even had knives pulled on them. It is escalating. I mean, in your opinion, Lynn, how much of the politicization of COVID, how much of this is a part of this?
I'm not sure that I think it's the political piece of it, more of the restrictions. And when people are sick, coming into healthcare now is just accelerated their anxiety, is what I would say. I think they've been isolated for a while. Yeah. They're coming out, they want immediate care, and there are mental health issues related to that, lack of resources, particularly in rural America. And so our goal is to have a button, and I brought the device so you could see it. It's this little button right here, and I push that so I have immediate response from my security team. So we have many things in place for security. We have staff, we have de-escalation training and all of those things. But the quicker that I can get a response to that staff member, the better off they're going to be.
Wow. I'm so glad you're able to do it. I'm glad you're doing it. I'm horrified and so deeply sad that it's necessary. Lynn, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. And next, Monica Lewinsky detailing the mental health struggles that she endured during the Clinton scandal. Monica Lewinsky says she thought about killing herself at the height of the Clinton scandal and its aftermath. And more than 2 decades have passed since her affair with the then president. It was a salacious story that dominated every news cycle at the time and completely transformed her life. It led to Clinton's impeachment. Lewinsky was relentlessly vilified. And now she is revealing more about her struggles with CNN's David Axelrod, and specifically the incredible toll that it all took on her mental health.
I just couldn't see a way out. And I thought that maybe that was the solution, and had even asked, this is also an interesting point of just, I had asked the OIC lawyers about what happens if I die, and as
my goodness.
Yeah, as more of an adult now, I think back, how is there not a protocol like that's a point where you're supposed to bring a psychologist in or, something? How is that not a breaking point?
Lewinsky has fought for years to reclaim the narrative and not let the scandal forever define her. She talks about that. And you have to hear more from her on David's podcast, The Axe Files. And thanks for joining me. Anderson starts now.
Where will we be in 5 years? In 50 years? Will everyone have access to information and security, to equality and fairness? Cisco has made it its purpose to power an inclusive future for all. Where will we be in 50 years? Let's go see. Between the world and what we make of it, there's a bridge. Cisco. the bridge to possible. Learn more at cisco.com/go/bridge to possible.